So yeah, the next day in court is coming up in December. In so many ways, I have already won. Durianrider has been discredited. His career on YouTube is over. His ability to hurt other people is over. His ability to harm the future of the vegan movement is over. And one by one, all the people who supported him woke up. I've spoken to many of these people directly. And let me tell you, when you ask them, what were you thinking? Why did you ever support this guy? You feel like you're talking to somebody who's woken up from a dream. Or I guess a better way to put it is they woke up from a dream, and then in hindsight, they realized it was a nightmare. Most of these people who supported Durianrider, when they look back at it, they can't believe they made this mistake themselves. And what Durianrider proved is that he does not have the personal integrity to be the most important vegan activist in the world, which is what he claimed he was. He doesn't deserve that title. He didn't earn it. He didn't earn your trust. On the contrary, he's taken the name of veganism and dragged it through the mud. He's taken your trust and dragged it through the mud. And now his career is over. But if the case gets dismissed, or if it ends inconclusively or in a dissatisfactory matter, I think we all know that in the court of public opinion, judgment has been handed down. And now, with the deletion of Durianrider's channel, I think I can safely say he is never going to victimize anyone again. The way he tried to make a victim out of me and failed, and the way he really did victimize and bully, harass, defame, and slander so many people before me, so many people who couldn't stand up for themselves, so many people who really suffered.
À-bas-le-ciel. À-bas-le-ciel.
One of the more hilarious moments in the runoff between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, in what turned out to be the election of Donald Trump, during the final formal debate between the two of them, there was a question from the audience, although it was very clearly a pre-selected, screened question from the audience, nothing spontaneous about it. Question came from the audience: could the two opponents say something positive? Could each say something positive about the other for the sake of having a more civil and mutually respectful debate? And you know, Hillary Clinton just barely managed to say something flattering about Donald Trump being a good parent, being a good father. Sure about that one? And Trump, for his part, I think he just completely failed to say anything positive about Hillary. He's not really a master of improvisation, and he's definitely not a master of flattery. You know, in a much deeper and more meaningful way, when I have had conflicts with professors, and believe me, at the University of Toronto, at University of Victoria, at about 6 other universities, I have had conflicts with professors. One of the things I always tried to do was take the time, go to the library, and look up their publications so that I had something positive to say about them, you know, in a face-to-face meeting, or in a meeting chaired by the ombudsman or the dean, or whatever the situation was. So, you know, I would go to the library and I would try to look up whatever books they had published. Sometimes they hadn't published books. I'd have to get their original PhD thesis. I'd have to get some obscure article they managed to publish. But that put me in a position to say something positive about my opponent in the debate, in whatever the situation was, where I could sit there and say, oh, I read your book. Oh, I read your PhD thesis. And I wish I could tell you that it led to really positive outcomes. Most of the occasions I can remember, it just caused the professor to be stunned and astonished and amazed, like it had never occurred to them that anyone actually would read their work. It tells you something sad about the state of academia in the 21st century. Like I remember once I sat down with a professor where it wasn't really a conflict. I was actually just meeting with him to talk about graduate school options, about MA and PhD options. And I had his PhD thesis with me on paper. So, I had read it. I also had proof that I'd read it, with me. And I was really prepared to talk about details. I didn't just want to make a vague blandishment where he'd think that I hadn't actually done the reading. But I remember he was very uncomfortable with talking about any of the details in there. So that's something flattering and positive I've done to reach out to professors. Sorry, when I say flattering, the point is you read their book, you read their PhD thesis, and even if you think 90% of it is garbage, you figure out the 10% you could say something positive about. You say, oh, I really like the work you did on this issue. I really like what you took it this way. So, in my interactions with both Freely and Durianrider, I have normally made it a point to have something positive to say. If you guys watch my old videos on Freely, my old videos on Freely, I always took the time to note, in a few of Freely's videos, she was just talking about her own life experience. She was just talking about, her history as a waitress, as a kind of bartender, the different jobs she had, different relationships she'd been in. There were some videos about Freely where she was just talking about her own life, talking about things she knew about and cared about, and where she was keeping it real. And those videos I can respect. That side, that aspect of what she did on YouTube, I can regard as positive and I can respect. A lot of other things she does, I don't respect. A lot of other things she has done and is doing, I regard as tremendously negative, as harmful to people, as dangerous, dangerous health advice, dangerous dietary advice, and so on, as really damaging to individual people, and as damaging to veganism as a movement. And I've been honest about that also, right? But I try to be honest about both sides. With a guy like Durianrider, there's not much positive I can say. But, there is one thing that sticks in my mind. I remember saying this to people in Chiang Mai when I was there over a year ago. I remember there was this one context, I'm not going to tell the whole story, where, Durianrider, and actually the context did include a lot of kind of lies and half-truths and defamations. It was a strange situation he'd put himself in where he was creating drama. But he said about himself that he doesn't let conflicts with individual people. He used coarse language. I'm leaving out about 3 swear words in paraphrases. But he says he doesn't let conflicts with individual people get in the way of his personal goals. And the example was, if what he wanted to do that day was ride his bicycle up a hill, then the fact that he had this conflict, the fact that somebody punched him in the face allegedly, the fact that he, had some kind of traumatic experience that day didn't matter. He wasn't going to let that slow him down in the least. He wouldn't let a personal conflict get in the way of the pursuit of his particular goals. I remember, sitting there, I read that comment from him and I thought, wow, okay, there's one little piece of the Durianrider personal philosophy that I can really relate to positively. Now, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if he lives by that. I think I've seen a lot of examples of Durianrider letting personal conflicts completely derail his personal goals, completely take over his life, and also completely change the content on his YouTube channel. And that is one way to draw up winners and losers today. Who is doing what they really want to do in their lives and digitally here on YouTube, and who's not? When I look at Durianrider's channel, I saw his channel the day before it was deleted. Every so often I've got to check up on his channel just to see if there's anything material related to the court case for me to know. But I remember looking at the list of recent videos on his channel the day before his channel was deleted and just being amazed at what a large percentage of it was clickbait. What a large percentage of it was, pictures of scantily clad women showing their breasts for no reason, and there's barely any relationship between the title of the video and the content of the video and the breasts or the half-naked women. Just so many videos reaching out for those cheap, extraneous views, And I don't know if that for him is a struggle to make money, or if it's a struggle to be famous, or a struggle to stay relevant, but it is really obvious that it's a struggle. And my channel, same period of time, if you look at what's on my channel, I'm doing exactly what it is I want to do. I'm doing exactly what it is I came on YouTube to do in the first place and what I want to do in the future. I mean, I've had recent videos talking about politics of Asia, immigration policy in Canada, quite a couple different videos talking about the Cree, the Ojibwe, First Nations, Indigenous peoples in Canada, study of languages. Of course, I've continued to have a lot of videos about vegan politics and what's going on in veganism, but it's not the only topic on my channel. That's not what I'm here to do. And I've continued to have a deep and meaningful connection with a small audience, which is exactly what I wanted all along. I was never thinking my channel was going to reach tens of thousands of people, but I knew I could have a really meaningful connection with a few hundred people. And again, compared to having a conversation in a coffee shop, that's really something. If I'm having a conversation with a coffee shop, maybe I just reach one person, maybe two or three. But to me, what I'm here on YouTube to do is to make friendships, to recruit colleagues, ultimately to recruit colleagues to really cooperate and collaborate in the vegan movement, to engage in political lobbying, make the world a better place, make the world a different place, have an impact in Canadian politics and so on. And yeah, I want to come on here and keep it real, whether it's talking about my divorce, talking about my personal life, talking about dating, talking about romance, talking about veganism, politics, philosophy, or any of those matters. So there are different ways to look at this situation and say who's winning and who's losing. Durianrider completely discredited himself. And, my court case is still not over. It's still not resolved. I still have another court date coming up. I hope it's the last court date, but probably won't be. It's a really weird mental exercise to ask yourself, well, what if my court case had wrapped up in record time? Like, what if the whole thing had been over in 3 months or 6 months? As in a parallel universe, if that had happened, then we never would have seen the bizarre process that we have seen here on YouTube in the last year, where one by one, all of the people who supported Durianrider realized he was impossible to support. Where one by one, people, including his closest friends, realized that he had been lying to them, he had been lying to the public on YouTube, and to some extent Durianrider had been lying to himself. So to give an example, a guy who I think is really Durianrider's last friend, his best friend, a close personal friend of his, there's this YouTuber called Angry Vegan. Angry Vegan has lived in Durianrider's house for several months, I think 6 months, but for a number of months he lived in Durianrider's house. They have videos where they joke about the fact that he still owes Durianrider rent and this kind of thing. I assume that is just a joke, but they've lived together, they've spent time together. They're about as close friends as any two adult heterosexual men can be. They are close personal friends, and Angry Vegan is one of the last people who still supports Durianrider. Angry Vegan met me and talked to me face-to-face for more than an hour. Angry Vegan asked to see the receipts from the court case, and I sent him literal receipts. I can talk a little bit more about that. But, it's still ridiculous to me when people say they want to see the receipts. Well, anyone who wanted to see the receipts has seen the receipts at this point. But a receipt is a receipt. That's all it is. It tells you how much was paid and when it was paid. That's about it. You know what I mean? Receipt. Anyway, this is a ridiculous thing on the internet, especially when you're in a situation on the internet like I'm in. I show my passport on camera, and Durianrider says it's a fake passport. So if I show receipts on the internet, obviously he's just going to say they're fake receipts. We've kind of been through this a few times with Durianrider. It's really counterproductive. But anyway, Angry Vegan, I showed him legal documents. I showed him receipts. But also I just said to him, look, man, you can go to the courthouse. If you don't believe me, just go to the courthouse, which is what Durianrider should have done, and look up the case. And I talked him through how to do that. So I don't believe he went on a day when court was in session, when my case was in session. I believe he just went up there and he looked at the writing on the wall, quite literally. And he confirmed that the case was real and ongoing and when the next hearing was. And his mind was blown. Because, of course, he realized in that moment the extent to which Durianrider had lied to him about everything. Now, in my face-to-face conversation with him, he did reflect also on his own sense of disappointment with how Durianrider had lied to him about everything. Even though Durianrider has admitted publicly to using performance-enhancing drugs. By performance-enhancing drugs, I mean drugs like steroids and similar drugs, not necessarily just steroids. But Angry Vegan said to me that even though he knew that, even though he'd seen Durianrider talking on the internet, admitting to the fact that he has a history of using this type of drug, Angry Vegan said to me how shocked and demoralized he felt when he was actually at Durianrider's house and he saw syringes in the garbage can. So Durianrider, that's one young man who really looked up to you. That's one young man who really came here on YouTube and was trying to make money the Durianrider way, trying to have a career as a YouTuber, a guy who doesn't have formal education, who doesn't have a formal career, doesn't have, a lot of job opportunities to look forward to. That's a guy who's really been working hard to emulate you, Durianrider, to copy you in many ways. He is your friend, but he's also your fan. And in a lot of ways, you broke his heart. You let him down. And I got to see that. I got to see that up close, face to face with him. And then I got to hear back about it when he rode his bicycle up to the courthouse and saw that the court case was real. And when he told Durianrider, which Durianrider must have known all along, when he told Durianrider, hey, Durianrider, the court case is real, because he'd gone to the courthouse and confirmed it himself independently. Doesn't have to rely on my word for it or something. He went and confirmed it. Durianrider's response was to tell Angry Vegan, keep it quiet, nobody needs to know. So to what extent Durianrider has been lying all along, that he always knew it was a real court case, is not even worth speculating about. But that was his response when people who were close to him in his life, and others have talked to me. Angry Vegan is not the only guy close to Durianrider who's come forward and talked to me when they said that to him. Now, beyond that, there's been this cavalcade over the last year. It's like falling dominoes. The first big one to fall was Vegan Gains, Richard. Vegan Gains, it's hard to remember now. Vegan Gains used to be a Durianrider supporter. They had a kind of strategic alliance on YouTube. Vegan Gains turned against Durianrider because of me, because of my case, because of my situation, because of what Durianrider did against me. And that was a huge turning point within our tiny little scene, within our tiny demi-monde. Joey Carbstrong turned against Durianrider. So many. I can't attempt to list them all. But people like Joey Carbstrong, even Jason Pizzino before him, a lot of these people were his close personal friends. Durianrider claims that he and Richard were close personal friends too. I assume that was true to some extent, although I assume, Durianrider is also exaggerating and lying about it to some extent, because Durianrider tends to exaggerate and lie about everything. But a lot of these people were his close personal friends. Durianrider didn't just discredit himself in front of his audience. He discredited himself with the people who knew him most closely, who trusted him most closely. And one by one, over a period of more than a year, all of them turned against him and rejected him. Another one being so-called Glucose Network. Sorry, Glucose Network's the name of his channel. But Abdullah Zainab, again, he was a huge Durianrider supporter, someone who really believed in and I think idolized Durianrider, and someone who was trying to imitate and emulate Durianrider's success. And even that guy had to eventually, turn against Durianrider. So it's a really strange, hypothetical scenario. What if the court case in Thailand had been quick and decisive? What if it happened right away? What if it happened within 3 months? That would have been a much more shocking situation for the whole vegan scene. And those people wouldn't have had the long, deliberative process of reflecting on what Durianrider had said, what Durianrider had done, asking themselves, who is this guy really? And what does any of this mean for the future of the vegan movement? Now, also in that same period of time, I really do think this is a victory for me and for people like me. What we've seen is lifestyle activism being totally discredited, the permanent vacation being abandoned as the leading paradigm in vegan activism. So guys, I get a lot of email. I get a lot of messages on Patreon. I get a lot of messages from all different sources. So I forget where this message came from, but from somewhere in Europe. It could have been Poland. I really forget. I remember I got a message from somewhere in Europe where the vegan movement is not very strong. And the person was saying to me with some frustration, look, locally here, this lifestyle activism, this permanent vacation activism, it totally took over formal vegan movements. There were formal vegan movements that previously had kind of imitated PETA, had imitated People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals in the United States. That wasn't very successful. And they said they had switched over, apparently due to the success of people like Freely and Durianrider, they'd switched over to this advocacy of personal beauty and weight loss and yoga pants and sport and this lifestyle glorifying activism, that they were trying to imitate what was going on. So that email was to me a striking one, because that was talking about formal vegan political organizations depoliticizing themselves and going over to imitating that lifestyle activism. Now, there were a few other, planks in the deck. If you're really telling that history, I do think the short-term success of a weight loss book called The Skinny Bitch has to be remembered. People already forget that. That was a huge step. There was the success of The Skinny Bitch. There was the success of a book by Dr. Greger called How Not to Die. And then, there was the success, short-term, meteoric success of Freely and a number of other people like Freely. And that convinced a lot of people that lifestyle activism was the future. And in this same period of time, during which my court case made incredibly little progress, was sitting around, in court in Thailand, basically people stopped regarding lifestyle activism as the future, and they started regarding lifestyle activism as the past. Now, I am not the only voice in that debate, but I was one of the first, I was one of the loudest, I was the most consistent. And of course, the fact that Durianrider debated me, the fact that he responded to me, the fact that he, attacked my criticism of the permanent vacation and lifestyle activism, then also elevated the significance of my critique, where people could realize, hey, I was hitting home. I was offering criticism that mattered to the people being criticized. And, I think that is true across the board. I've talked to those people. And a lot of those people have changed. A lot of those people have moved on. I don't have to name names. In a lot of ways, the scene has collapsed. And on an individual level, people made the choice to go back to school, to go back to having a real job. The dream of, the dream or the nightmare of earning your living as a so-called full-time activist, when what you're doing is not even activism, that has gone out of style. And new fashions have come in to replace it. I would say currently Joey Carbstrong's method is fashionable. Earthling Ed's method is fashionable. And currently, I don't think it's going to last, what Vegan Gains has been doing with these long format debates via, live streaming debates over the internet between vegans and meteors. That's currently fashionable. Now, each of those has its own advantages and disadvantages. We could do a critique about that. But fundamentally, all of them are vastly superior to the yoga pants, weight loss, cult of personal beauty, cult of personality, lifestyle activism, permanent vacation paradigm that I was criticizing here on YouTube for a period of about 2 years. That's over. And now, of course, the other thing that's over is Durianrider's career and Durianrider's influence. So, obviously I played a role in the collapse of his career and his influence, but the largest role goes to Durianrider himself. He destroyed his own credibility more than I could have ever destroyed his credibility. Simply put, he made bad choices. In terms of what is the situation with the case today, I don't even get questions about this anymore, which is another sense in which I've won. If it was the case that tons of people had a lot of interest in this, that might be a bad sign, frankly. For me, the less public interest there is in the case, the better. Because, I'm not trying to make Durianrider famous again. I'm really not. In mid-December, I have another day in court in Chiang Mai. The most recent, a couple months ago, the last court date in Chiang Mai, a bunch of vegans attended. They went just to have a look. So Sam the vegan went to my last court date. And Joe Best. I've seen a photograph of Joe Best in court. He showed up in my day in court. So this is another thing that discredited Durianrider and Chiang Mai to a massive extent. The fact that there were so many people there who saw for themselves that the court case was ongoing, who actually showed up in court and were witnesses to the ongoing proceedings against Durianrider. I don't receive questions about the finances from anyone except Durianrider. Durianrider did write to me the other day asking what happened to the $6,500. The $6,500 itself, the fee for the lawyer, that went directly to the lawyer. And again, I've shown receipts. Of course, the problem is we live in a world where people say, well, the receipts can be fake. Of course they can be fake. You think about, if you actually go to a shop and buy something, what is a receipt? A receipt is a piece of paper printed out from a computer. Anyone can print out that piece of paper. But, also in this case, we're talking about a receipt that's sent by email. So it's just It's an email attachment sent to me from my lawyer. But again, the way to confirm this is to go to the courthouse. If you want to, you can phone up my law firm or something. You know, if a journalist, for example, really wanted to verify this, a journalist could make those phone calls or take those steps, you know, whether it's to the courthouse, to the law firm, what have you, to verify those things. But the receipt itself is not a magical solution to this problem, a problem that's only created by Durianrider and only for very transparently self-serving interests. But that went from the crowdfunding website directly to the law firm. So it was never in my bank account. That money was transferred directly from the crowdfunding site to the law firm. And I'm glad that squeaked in terms of the exchange rate. That was just enough money in Thai baht at the time. So that was a near miss thing, actually. I was not happy about that at the time. Long story about how hard it was to even get that transfer done from my crappy bank in Kunming, China, where I was living at the time. You know, there also is some money that was not sent to the crowdfunding site that was sent to PayPal. The money that was sent to PayPal, which will be a couple $100 extra or maybe over $1,000, I was never able to get the money out of PayPal. When I go back to Canada, I can try. I am assuming that the money from PayPal is much less than the amount I've spent just flying back and forth to Thailand, to Chiang Mai, Thailand, in order to attend the court date. But I won't know until I get back to Canada, presumably get on the phone with PayPal, and then from a fixed address in Canada with a Canadian bank account, struggle to try to get PayPal to send me that money. I mean, I guess I'm optimistic in even assuming once I'm back in Canada, I'll be able to get the money to PayPal. It's possible I'll never be able to get it. That is possible. But, you know, for whatever reason, when I was in China, and I did, believe me, I got on the phone, I made long-distance phone calls to PayPal, I had angry email back and forth, and PayPal couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. I'd assume that's partly just because it was a bank account in China, but obviously it's a real black market against PayPal, because I was there and I was saying, look, I can send you guys photographs of my passport and my visa, proving that it's really me. I'm really in China. This is really my bank account. Like, what's the problem at your end? But I could never get a straight answer to PayPal. So if there's an extra $1,000 that was donated via PayPal, not via the crowdfunding site, it's possible I'll collect that eventually. It's possible I never will. And then I'll just look at, well, I've had to repeatedly fly back and forth to Chiang Mai just for the court case and say, well, are we just going to say that balances out? Or is there any significant difference where, I don't know, I mean, if there's some difference, I can give some of it to a vegan charity or what have you. But at this point, you know, I just say I'll cross that bridge when I can get it, because it has been impossible working with PayPal. From my garret in Yunnan, China, that has really been impossible. And again, if anyone doesn't believe it, you can really quickly Google bad experiences with PayPal. Tons of people have bad experiences. It's hilarious. Durianrider attacked me on that too, claiming that nobody has trouble with international financial transfers from PayPal. Well, believe me, plenty of us have trouble with international financial transfers from PayPal. I'm just one of them. So yeah, the next day in court is coming up in December. In so many ways, I have already won. Durianrider has been discredited. His career on YouTube is over. His ability to hurt other people is over. His ability to harm the future of the vegan movement is over. And one by one, all the people who supported him woke up. And like, I've spoken to Joey Carbstrong directly. I've spoken to Richard Vegan Gains directly. I've spoken to many of these people directly. And let me tell you, when you ask them, what were you thinking? Why did you ever support this guy? You feel like you're talking to somebody who's woken up from a dream. Or I guess a better way to put it is they woke up from a dream, and then in hindsight, they realized it was a nightmare. Most of these people who supported Durianrider, when they look back at it, they can't believe they made this mistake themselves. They can't believe it. And I've made videos in the past talking about the mix of motives. Why were people swept up in this enthusiasm? And why is it now that it seems so regrettable in retrospect? Guys, in politics, leadership matters. It really matters whether you put your faith in someone like Durianrider, whether you put your faith in someone like Donald Trump, whether you put your trust and hopes in one person rather than another, can matter. It can be much more decisive than the particular principles or the particular political platform you're choosing to support. In the past, I've pointed out that in terms of a political platform, Durianrider and I have a remarkable amount in common. We're both very hard in terms of being anti-drug, anti-marijuana, anti-alcohol, even anti-caffeine. Like, we have stuff in common that way. I also have a background doing long-distance cycling. I've also lived in Thailand for years, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. Actually, there's a lot of common ground there. And in terms of aspirations for the future of vegan activism, overtly stated, aspirations, you could say he and I have a lot in common too. But there are differences of principle, and there are differences of person and personal integrity. And what Durianrider proved is that he does not have the personal integrity to be the most important vegan activist in the world, which is what he claimed he was. He doesn't deserve that title. He didn't earn it. He didn't earn your trust. On the contrary, he's taken the name of veganism and dragged it through the mud. He's taken your trust and dragged it through the mud. And now his career is over. If we win in court, it'll be a nice cherry on top. But amazingly, while this court case has been spinning its wheels, has been wasting so much time with paperwork and process, which I could talk more about, but nobody even wants to know the details of the paperwork and the process, we have seen chapter after chapter unfold in that story. Sure, I'd love to win in court, but if the case gets dismissed or if it ends inconclusively or in a dissatisfactory manner, I think we all know that in the court of public opinion, judgment has been handed down. And now, with the deletion of Durianrider's channel, I think I can safely say he is never going to victimize anyone again. The way he tried to make a victim out of me and failed, and the way he really did victimize and bully, harass, defame, and slander so many people before me, so many people who couldn't stand up for themselves, so many people who really suffered. And hey, in case you think I'm self-pitying, I'll just say again, I see this in a political and historical context. Yeah, I've suffered. Yeah, it's been hard on me. It's been a strange process in so many ways. I didn't ask for this fight, but when the fight was brought to me, I played to win. However, if you're looking at this in the context of other political struggles, for civil rights, for human rights, for any given political cause, who has suffered less? For me to step up and play my role as a leader in vegan activism, what did I have to do? I wrote a children's storybook. I'm paying an illustrator to illustrate the storybook. I'm going to publish this storybook. I come on YouTube and talk about my feelings. I didn't have to live in a cave. I didn't have to lead a revolution. I didn't have to go through any of the other horrors that a lot of other political leaders go through in new political movements. I didn't have to spend a day sitting in jail. And we do still have a lot of questions about illegal methods of activism and veganism. We have new questions being raised right now, again, by Direct Action Everywhere, DXE, about illegal methods and people facing prison sentences and so on, which I don't support. I really don't support that stuff, people. I haven't had to suffer in any of those ways. So yes, this did bring an unwanted crisis into my life. However, I don't feel sorry for myself in the slightest. Apart from the fact that I'm winning, apart from the fact that at this point I can say in the past tense, I already won, compared to any other political leader in any other movement, past, present, or future, who has suffered less.
À-bas-le-ciel.